I still see their eyes in my nightmares, empty, devoted, staring right through me as if I was already gone. They called it peace, but it felt like a void, a suffocating silence where individuality went to die. I remember the first time I saw their compound, nestled deep in the woods, almost hidden from the world. A place where the air itself seemed to hum with a strange, unsettling energy. I was young, foolish, and chasing a story, convinced I could uncover their secrets without becoming one of them. How naive I was. I thought I understood fear, but what I found there, what they taught me about true terror, reshaped my very soul. It wasn't just about control, it was about stripping away everything that made you human, leaving only a vessel for their twisted doctrine. And the whispers, oh, the whispers never truly leave you. They echo in the quiet moments, reminding me of the darkness I barely escaped. The dirt track leading to it was barely visible, overgrown with ferns and choked by hanging moss. My old car bounced and scraped, each lurch a reminder of how far I was from anything familiar, anything safe. The air grew colder, thicker, even in the midday sun. And then, through a break in the ancient pines, I saw it. Not a single imposing structure, but a cluster of weathered wooden buildings surrounded by a fence that seemed more symbolic than practical. No barbed wire, no guards patrolling openly. Just a plain, tall wooden fence, like a stockade, silently declaring its boundaries. It felt less like a prison and more like a tomb. A figure emerged from the largest building as I killed the engine. Tall, gaunt, dressed in simple, drab clothing. Their face was devoid of expression, their eyes, those eyes, empty, devoted, just as I remembered them in my nightmares. They didn't smile, didn't offer a hand, just stood there. "You have arrived," a voice, flat and toneless, stated. Not a question, an affirmation. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had prepared speeches, questions, a whole journalistic arsenal, but faced with that profound, unsettling stillness, all words evaporated. I stepped out of the car, the crunch of gravel under my boots sounding impossibly loud in the overwhelming silence. There were no birds, no insects, just the faint rustle of leaves and that strange hum I mentioned. A low vibration that seemed to resonate in my very bones. It wasn't a sound you heard with your ears, but one you felt in your chest. The figure turned, a slow, deliberate movement, and began to walk towards the main building. I had no choice but to follow. Inside, the light was dim, filtered through grimy windows. More figures sat on wooden benches, perfectly still, perfectly silent. They didn't look up as I entered, didn't acknowledge my presence. Their gazes were fixed forward towards a raised platform at the front of the room where a single crude wooden chair sat empty. It was like walking into a painting, a tableau of perfectly preserved, lifeless devotion. This was their peace, I realized. This suffocating absence of thought, of emotion, of life. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to run, to scream, but something held me paralyzed, a morbid fascination mixed with a growing icy dread. The gaunt figure gestured to an empty spot on a bench, and I sat. The wood was cold beneath me. I tried to meet the eyes of the person next to me, a woman whose face was etched with a serenity so profound it was terrifying. Her eyes, like the others, were vacant, yet they seemed to stare right through me. Not seeing me, but seeing something else, something beyond. It was then I understood. They weren't just empty. They were filled with whatever doctrine they had absorbed, leaving no room for the individual. I wasn't an outsider observing. I was already becoming part of their landscape, a new canvas for their twisted art. The whispers began almost immediately. Not audible voices, but a persistent, insidious suggestion in the back of my mind that I was home. And that thought, above all else, chilled me to the core. The thought that I was home echoed in my mind, a cold, alien presence that settled deep in my chest. It wasn't my thought. It felt like an intrusion, a seed planted by the oppressive silence and those vacant, unseeing eyes. I tried to shake it off, to remind myself of my purpose, my notebook, my journalistic detachment. But the words felt hollow even to me. My fingers, resting on my knees, felt strangely heavy, as if gravity itself was pulling me down, anchoring me to this cold wooden bench. The air, thick and still, seemed to press in on my eardrums, amplifying the low, resonant hum that permeated the building. It wasn't just in my bones now. It felt like it was in my blood, a vibration that threatened to unravel my very being. I stole a glance at the woman beside me again. Her face, devoid of wrinkles despite its apparent age, was a mask of serene emptiness. Her breathing was so shallow, I wondered if she was even alive, or merely a perfectly preserved husk. Her eyes, fixed on the empty platform, held no flicker of thought, no spark of individual will. It was terrifying, this absolute surrender. It was the antithesis of everything I believed, everything I was. Yet, a part of me, a small, dark, vulnerable part, felt a strange, almost magnetic pull towards that complete absence. To simply let go. No, I fought back against the thought. I had to resist. Then, a subtle shift. Not a sound, not a movement from the assembled figures, but a change in the air, a sudden intensification of that pervasive hum. It was as if the very atoms in the room had aligned, anticipating something. All gazes, already fixed, seemed to deepen their focus on the raised platform. And then he appeared, not emerging from a side door, not walking in from the back. He simply was there, standing behind the crude wooden chair, as if he had materialized from the shadows themselves. He was older than the gaunt figure who had met me, his face a web of fine lines, but his presence was immense, radiating a quiet authority that filled the space. He wore simple, dark robes, and his silver hair was pulled back from a high forehead. But it was his eyes that truly held me. They weren't empty like the others. They were alive, piercing, yet calm, like the surface of a deep, still lake that concealed unimaginable depths. He didn't smile, didn't speak immediately. He just stood there, surveying the silent congregation, his gaze sweeping over each face, lingering for a fraction of a second before moving on. When his eyes met mine, a jolt went through me. It wasn't an aggressive stare, but one of profound understanding, as if he could see every fear, every doubt, every hidden longing I possessed. He raised a hand, slowly, deliberately, and the hum intensified further, vibrating through the wooden bench, through my bones, into the very core of my skull. It felt like a physical pressure, a gentle, insistent force that sought to flatten me, to make me as still and as silent as the others. He began to speak, his voice a low, resonant baritone that required no amplification, effortlessly filling the vast, dim space. He spoke of the illusion of choice, of the burden of self, of the chaotic world outside, riddled with pain and deception. He offered clarity, purpose, a release from the endless struggle. "Here," he intoned, his voice weaving a spell, "here you are free. Free from the chains of your own making, free from the noise of a world that seeks only to divide and diminish you." His words weren't shouting, weren't overtly manipulative. They were a balm, a soothing whisper promising peace. And as he spoke, I felt a strange urge to believe him, to simply lay down the heavy weight of my own identity, to let the hum wash over me and dissolve everything that was me. My chest tightened, my breath catching. This wasn't fear of a monster. This was fear of my own complicity, of the insidious way this place, this man, was dismantling my defenses, piece by agonizing piece. The whispers in my mind grew louder now, no longer just a suggestion, but a persistent chorus. Let go, let go. "You are home." I clenched my fists, fingernails digging into my palms, trying to hold on to myself, to the very idea of myself before it was completely erased. This was the true terror, the one that stripped you not of your life, but of your very soul. The pressure inside my skull became almost unbearable, a low, thrumming ache that mirrored the insistent vibration in the air. His voice, a velvet hammer, continued to chip away at my resolve, promising an end to the ceaseless noise of my own mind, the endless anxieties of the outside world. And for a terrifying, fleeting moment, I wanted it. I wanted to drop the burden, to let go of the frantic struggle to be me, to simply exist, unburdened, unthinking, like the still figures around me. A small, insidious voice, not the whispers, but my own internal traitor, suggested it would be so easy, so peaceful. Just let the current take you. My fingernails dug deeper into my palms, a desperate anchor to the pain, to the physical reality of my own body. I focused on the cold wood beneath my thighs, the faint scent of damp earth and old timber that clung to the air. Anything to distract from the siren song of his words, from the relentless hum that felt like it was trying to retune my very being. I forced myself to look at the other faces in the room, searching for a flicker of individuality, a hint of the people they must have once been. But there was nothing. Only that profound, terrifying serenity, a blank slate where a soul once resided. It wasn't peace, it was surrender, an absolute, terrifying capitulation of self. He paused then, his gaze still sweeping, but slowing, lingering on faces, then moving on. And then his eyes found mine again. There was no judgment, no malice, just that unsettling depth of understanding. It was as if he saw the battle raging within me, the desperate clawing to hold on to my identity, and he simply observed. A faint, almost imperceptible tilt of his head, a gesture that spoke volumes without a single word. It said, "I see your struggle. It is futile." And the whispers in my mind, now louder, more insistent, seemed to emanate from him, from the very air around him. Resistance is pain. Let go. Be free. He continued, his voice softening further, becoming almost a lullaby. He spoke of the illusion of desire, the suffering inherent in attachment, the liberation that came from shedding all earthly wants. He painted a picture of a world beyond the compound gates as a place of ceaseless torment, a prison of our own making, while here, within these walls, was the true sanctuary, a place where the self was not diminished, but transcended, I thought, or utterly erased. The distinction felt terrifyingly thin. My breathing became shallow, my chest tight. I wanted to stand up, to shout, to shatter the suffocating silence with my dissent, but my limbs felt heavy, weighted down by an unseen force. The hum intensified again, rising in pitch ever so slightly, a high-frequency drone that rattled my teeth. It felt like a drill, boring into my mind, trying to loosen the foundations of my own thoughts. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, trying to regain some semblance of internal quiet. But the whispers were there, even in the darkness behind my eyelids. Home. You are home. Be still. This wasn't journalism anymore. This wasn't observation. This was a direct assault on my consciousness, a psychological siege, and I was losing ground, one agonizing inch at a time. The true terror wasn't the threat of physical harm. It was the terrifying allure of oblivion, the promise of peace at the cost of everything I was. I felt a cold sweat prickle on my skin, fighting the urge to simply close my eyes and let the silence consume me. The silence, once a mere absence of sound, had become a living, breathing entity, pressing down on me, trying to flatten me into the same two-dimensional devotion as the figures around me. My eyelids felt heavy, so heavy. The promise of peace, of simply letting go, was a seductive whisper that curled around the edges of my consciousness, promising an end to the ceaseless, agonizing fight. My mind felt like a battlefield, two armies clashing, the insidious calm of the cult leader's voice, the hypnotic thrum, and the desperate, frantic scrabble of my own will. To stop fighting felt like the most logical, most comforting thing in the world. Just close your eyes. Just breathe. Just be. But then, a flicker, a face. Not one of the vacant, serene faces in this room, but a different one. My editor's face, stern and impatient, demanding the story, the truth. The reason I had driven down this god-forsaken dirt track away from everything familiar. I was chasing a story, not running from myself. A jolt, like a cold splash of water, cut through the haze. This wasn't peace, it was oblivion. This wasn't freedom, it was a cage built of serenity where individuality was the first sacrifice. My fingernails bit deeper, drawing a thin line of pain, a tangible reminder that I was still here, still me. The leader's gaze, which had momentarily shifted, returned to mine. There was no change in his serene expression, but I felt it, a subtle tightening of his focus, as if he sensed the flicker of defiance, the spark of resistance I had just managed to rekindle. His voice, still a low, resonant baritone, seemed to find a new frequency, one that resonated directly with that fragile part of my mind that had just fought back. He spoke of the illusion of purpose, the futility of chasing fleeting truths in a world designed to mislead. He said that the greatest stories were not found in the chaotic external world, but within the stillness of the surrendered self. My head began to ache, a dull, throbbing pain behind my eyes that worsened with each word. The hum intensified, a physical vibration that rattled the fillings in my teeth and blurred the edges of my vision. It felt like my very skull was vibrating, trying to shake loose the thoughts, the memories, the anchors that still held me to myself. I focused on the cold wood beneath my hands, the rough grain of the bench. I tried to focus on the faint scent of pine and damp earth, anything real, anything tangible to counter the overwhelming unreality of the moment. My breath hitched in my throat, a silent gasp for air that felt thin and insufficient. This was no ordinary fear. It was a terror that seeped into the marrow of my bones, a creeping dread that threatened to dissolve the very concept of I. It wasn't about what they might do to me, but what they were trying to make me do to myself. to willingly dismantle my own mind, to surrender my consciousness to their collective void. The whispers were no longer a chorus, they were a singular, insistent voice, clear as a bell, echoing in the cavern of my skull. Let go. You are already home. Be still. And the most terrifying part was that for another fleeting second, a part of me, exhausted and overwhelmed, almost wanted to obey. I had to find a way out, not just physically, but mentally, before there was nothing left to save. The leader's gaze, a weight on my soul, seemed to bore into the very core of my resistance. He saw it, I knew he did. That tiny, flickering flame of defiance I was desperately trying to shield. His voice, still a deep, mesmerizing current, continued its assault. But now it felt more personal, aimed directly at me. "You cling to your stories," he murmured, his eyes never leaving mine, "to your fleeting truths, believing they define you. But they are merely echoes, shadows of a self you have yet to truly discover. Here, we offer the silence where true self can emerge, unburdened by the world's lies." My head throbbed, a relentless drumbeat against the inside of my skull. The hum was a physical presence wrapping around me, trying to squeeze the individuality out of me. I clenched my jaw, tasting blood where I bit my tongue. Anything, any physical sensation to tether me to this moment, to this body, to me. I focused on the faint, almost imperceptible tremor in his hand as he gestured, a tiny imperfection in the otherwise perfect tableau he presented. It was a lifeline, a reminder that he, too, was flesh and blood, not some ethereal, all-consuming entity. He was human, and humans could be resisted. A fierce, desperate surge of anger, cold and sharp, cut through the haze of exhaustion and dread. My editor, my story, the faces of the people I knew, the chaotic, beautiful, messy world I had left behind. This wasn't peace, it was a surrender, a capitulation, and I wouldn't do it, not yet, not while there was still a shred of me left to fight. The whispers clawed at my mind. "Let go. It's so easy. You belong here." But I pushed back, a silent, furious roar echoing in the cavern of my own consciousness. "No!" The leader paused, his hand still raised, the hum momentarily wavering, a barely perceptible dip in its relentless drone. His eyes, those deep, still pools, seemed to widen fractionally, a flicker of something unreadable passing through them. Was it surprise, recognition, or just a trick of the dim light? He didn't speak for a long moment, simply held my gaze, and in that silence, a new kind of terror bloomed. It wasn't the terror of being overwhelmed, but the terror of being seen, truly seen, in my defiance, and the anticipation of what that recognition might bring. Then, slowly, his hand lowered. The hum returned to its previous intensity, perhaps even a shade stronger. His gaze shifted, sweeping over the other figures in the room, a silent acknowledgement, a reaffirmation of their unwavering devotion. It was a dismissal, a subtle but profound rejection of my resistance. He had tried, he had offered, and I had refused. He wasn't going to force me, not directly, not yet. He began to speak again, his voice now addressing the room, but every word felt like it was still meant for me, a continuation of his earlier sermon, but with a new chilling undertone. "Some cling to their chains," he intoned, his voice resonating through the room, preferring the illusion of struggle to the boundless freedom of surrender. They believe their pain defines them, their doubt protects them. But true understanding dawns only when the ego is shed, when the self dissolves into the greater truth. He made it sound so reasonable, so logical, like a natural progression. My heart pounded, a frantic bird trapped in my ribcage. He wasn't overtly threatening me, but his words were a promise of eventual triumph, a declaration that my resistance was temporary, a mere delay. The meeting, if you could call it that, continued for what felt like an eternity. He spoke of the great unveiling, of the coming unity, of shedding the old skin of the world. The other figures remained perfectly still, perfectly silent, their vacant eyes fixed on him, absorbing every word, every nuance. I sat there, a knot of raw nerves, clinging to my defiance like a shipwrecked sailor to a piece of driftwood. My fingers ached from clenching, my head hammered, and the whispers, though momentarily subdued by my internal struggle, began to creep back, insidious and soft. He knows, he sees, you can't fight forever. Finally, with another slow, deliberate movement, he raised both hands, then brought them together in a single soft clap. The sound, muffled and almost absorbed by the silence, was nonetheless a signal. The hum began to recede, slowly, gently, like a tide pulling back from the shore. The pressure in my head eased, ever so slightly. The figures on the benches, as if on cue, began to rise, not in a rush, but with the same eerie, fluid slowness with which they had sat. They filed out, one by one, through a low archway at the back of the room, their movements synchronized, their faces still devoid of individual expression. I watched them go, a chilling procession of lost souls. I was still on the bench, my body stiff, my mind reeling, utterly alone in that vast, dim space. But I was still me, for now. No, the words screamed silently in my mind, a desperate, defiant cry against the encroaching void. My eyes, which I realized had been unfocused, snapped back to the leaders. His serene expression didn't falter, but a faint, almost imperceptible shift in his gaze told me he had heard my internal rebellion. His piercing eyes, those deep, still lakes, seemed to deepen further, reflecting not my image, but something far more unsettling. He didn't raise his voice, didn't change his tone, but his next words felt like they were spoken directly into the chambers of my skull, bypassing my ears entirely. Resistance, he intoned, his voice still a low, hypnotic current, is a heavy cloak, my child. It binds you to the very suffering you claim to seek understanding of. To observe truly, one must first shed the armor of preconceived notions, the shield of self. He paused, and the hum, that insidious, pervasive vibration, seemed to swell, pressing against my eardrums, vibrating through the cold wood of the bench, a physical manifestation of his will. It felt like a subtle yet powerful attempt to dislodge my renewed resolve, to shake loose the anchors I had just managed to drop. My breath hitched. He saw it. He saw the struggle, the fear, the desperate clawing for my own identity. He wasn't just observing, he was dissecting. He was inviting me, no, compelling me, to willingly participate in my own undoing. A fresh wave of cold sweat prickled my skin, despite the oppressive stillness of the air. This wasn't a battle of wills, it was a battle for my very essence. I tried to focus on something else, anything, the woman beside me. Her eyes, still fixed forward, seemed to glow with a faint internal light, a reflection of the doctrine she had absorbed. Her face was utterly devoid of tension, of thought, of anything that made her a distinct individual. It was a terrifying mirror of the peace he offered, and it solidified my resolve. This wasn't peace, it was erasure. "You came seeking truth," the leader continued, his gaze unwavering. "But truth, like peace, is not found in the clamor of the world, nor in the frantic beating of a conflicted heart. It is found in the stillness, in the surrender." He extended a hand slowly, deliberately, not towards me, but out over the silent congregation. It was an invitation, a benediction, and a chilling promise. "Here," he said, his voice dropping to an almost inaudible whisper, yet filling the entire space. "Here, we transcend the illusion of self. We become one." The collective stillness of the room, which had been unnerving, now felt actively hostile, a palpable force pushing against me. The air grew heavy, thick with unspoken expectation. I felt a strange, almost dizzying sensation, as if the boundaries of my own body were blurring, threatening to dissolve into the collective consciousness of the cult. The whispers intensified, no longer just in my mind, but seeming to emanate from the very walls, from the silent figures around me. One of us, let go, be still." My head pounded. I dug my fingernails deeper into my palms, the sharp pain a desperate affirmation of my singular existence. I was not one of them. I was not still. I was fighting. The leader watched, a faint, almost imperceptible hint of something, not a smile, but an acknowledgement, playing on his lips. He knew I was resisting, and he seemed to relish the struggle. It was as if my defiance was merely another piece in his grand, terrifying design. My breathing became ragged, shallow. I had to get out. I had to break this spell, this suffocating embrace of their peace. But how? Every fiber of my being screamed for escape, yet my body remained rooted to the cold wooden bench, held captive not by chains, but by an invisible psychological force far more potent. The leader's eyes, those deep, unsettling pools, didn't betray surprise, only a slight narrowing, a predatory focus. The hum, which had momentarily seemed to recede with my internal roar, surged back with renewed force. A tidal wave of pressure that threatened to crush the fragile defiance I had just mustered. It felt like a physical hand pressing down on the crown of my head, trying to force my gaze to the floor, to break my will. I thought it, teeth gritted, my jaw aching from the tension. I wouldn't look away. I wouldn't. His voice, however, softened even further, becoming a silken thread that tried to weave itself into the frayed edges of my sanity. "Resistance is a heavy cloak," he crooned, his words seeming to bypass my ears and resonate directly in my skull. Why cling to discomfort when ease awaits? He took a slow, deliberate step forward, moving from behind the crude wooden chair, his robes rustling almost imperceptibly. It was a subtle shift, but in that perfectly still room, it felt like an earthquake. The assembled figures remained motionless, their vacant eyes still fixed on the platform. Yet I felt their collective awareness, a silent, oppressive weight pressing in. They were watching me, or rather, watching him watch me. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. My breath came in shallow gasps. I could feel the cold sweat trickling down my spine, but a strange, defiant heat burned in my chest. He was trying to break me, to make me one of them, another empty vessel. But I had seen enough. I had felt the chill of their peace, the suffocating void where life and thought withered. This was not liberation. "You speak of freedom," I managed to rasp, the words feeling alien and weak in the profound silence. but you offer only a prison of the mind. The sound of my own voice, raw and untamed, was a shock, a discordant note in their carefully constructed symphony of stillness. It startled even me. A flicker, a momentary disturbance, passed through the serene emptiness of the faces around me. A ripple, almost imperceptible, but it was there. I had broken their perfect tableau. The leader stopped, less than 10 feet from me now. His eyes, no longer merely understanding, seemed to ignite with a cold, almost amused light. "A prison," he repeated, his voice still soft, but with an underlying current of steel that sent a shiver down my spine. He extended a hand, not towards me, but upward, palm open, as if offering the very air. And as he did, the hum in the room intensified to an almost unbearable pitch, a high-frequency whine that drilled into my eardrums, blurring my vision. The dim light seemed to pulsate, and the air crackled with an unseen energy. I felt a sudden dizzying lurch, as if the floor beneath me had tilted. My head spun, and the whispers, now a cacophony, screamed in my mind. "Let go, surrender, it's too late." My body trembled, every nerve ending screaming in protest. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the overwhelming assault, but it was useless. The sound, the pressure, the insidious suggestions, they were all inside me now. I was losing. I was slipping. Just as the darkness threatened to consume me, a sharp, metallic tang filled my mouth. I had bitten through my tongue. The sudden, intense pain was a lifeline, a brutal, visceral anchor back to myself. This wasn't peace, this was agony, and I wouldn't surrender to it. Not yet. I forced my eyes open, locking on to the leader's face, now a distorted blur through the vibrating air. His serene expression was gone, replaced by something colder, something infinitely ancient. A slow, almost imperceptible smile touched the corners of his lips, a smile that promised not comfort, but an inevitable, crushing defeat. "You struggle," he whispered, his voice now a mere breath, yet it filled the room. "Because you believe there is still something to gain, but there is only release." The hum reached a crescendo, a physical force that threatened to tear me apart. My vision swam, the figures around me blurring into indistinct shapes. I felt a pressure building behind my eyes, as if they might burst. My ears rang, a piercing shriek that drowned out all other sound, even the leader's voice. I was on the verge of collapsing, my body screaming for relief, for the promised oblivion. But then, through the blinding pain and the deafening shriek, a single, clear thought pierced through the haze. The car, my escape. It was a desperate, foolish thought, but it was mine. It was a way out. The realization ignited a spark, a tiny ember of hope in the encroaching darkness. I couldn't fight his power directly, but I could run. I could try. With a guttural cry that tore from my throat, raw and uncontrolled, I lurched forward, pushing off the bench. The cold wood scraped against my legs as I stumbled, my muscles protesting. The unexpected movement shattered the static tableau of the room. A collective gasp, faint and ethereal, seemed to rise from the still figures. The leader's cold smile faltered, a fleeting flicker of something akin to surprise crossing his ancient face. It was all I needed. I didn't look back. I didn't think. I just ran. My legs felt like lead, my movements clumsy and uncoordinated. The hum followed me, a relentless hound at my heels, trying to drag me back into the suffocating stillness. The dim light of the building seemed to stretch, the exit door a distant, unreachable beacon. My lungs burned, each breath a searing pain. I could hear nothing but the ringing in my ears and the frantic pounding of my own heart. I was running blind, fueled only by a primal, desperate will to survive, to remain myself. I threw myself at the door, my shoulder slamming against the rough wood. It groaned, but held. Panic flared. I fumbled for the latch, my fingers numb and clumsy. The whispers were back, louder now, mocking. "There is no escape. You are home." No. The word wasn't spoken, but it thundered in my mind, a raw, defiant roar against the insidious calm. My body, however, remained rooted, paralyzed by the hum that now felt like 1,000 needles pricking my brain, trying to sever the connection between thought and action. The leader's eyes, those deep, unsettling pools, narrowed almost imperceptibly. He saw it. He felt my refusal. The hum, which had been a drone, now sharpened, a high-pitched whine that clawed at my eardrums, vibrating through my teeth, making my vision swim. It wasn't just sound, it was pure, concentrated pressure, trying to compress my very consciousness into submission. My head felt like it was going to explode, every nerve ending screaming in protest. The air grew impossibly heavy, thick with unseen energy, pressing down on me, trying to flatten me, to make me as still and empty as the husks around me. His voice, however, remained a calm, chilling balm, cutting through the sonic assault. "You fight," he observed, a faint, almost pitying smile touching the corners of his lips. "You cling to the illusion of self, to the pain of individuality. It is a lonely burden, is it not? To bear the weight of all your choices, all your regrets, all your fears. Here, there is none of that, only release." Release. The word hung in the air, seductive and terrifying. For a split second, the sheer exhaustion of fighting, of holding on to this fragile, battered self, threatened to overwhelm me. My eyelids fluttered, heavy, so heavy. To just let go, to sink into the quiet, the blank slate, the promised peace. But then the pain, the sharp, searing pain of my fingernails digging deeper, tearing the skin on my palms. It was a lifeline, a brutal, visceral reminder that I was still here, still me. The scent of my own blood, metallic and raw, cut through the cloying sweetness of the leader's words, through the suffocating hum. It was real. I was real. My eyes snapped open, blazing with a desperate, furious clarity. I wasn't going to let them take me, not like this. I looked at the woman beside me, her vacant eyes fixed on the leader, her face a mask of serene oblivion. This wasn't peace, it was a living death, and I would not become another empty canvas for their twisted art. A surge of adrenaline, cold and pure, ripped through me. My heart hammered against my ribs, not with fear, but with a desperate, primal urge to survive. I pushed back against the weight, against the hum, against the insidious whispers that clawed at my mind. No! This time, the word escaped my lips, a ragged, defiant croak that shattered the suffocating silence of the room. It was barely a whisper, but in that profound stillness, it resonated like a thunderclap. The effect was instantaneous, devastating. The hum faltered, a momentary glitch in the oppressive symphony. The leader's serene expression cracked, replaced by a flicker of something colder, something ancient and terrible. His eyes, for the first time, held a spark of genuine anger, a predatory gleam that sent a fresh wave of terror through me. Around me, the still figures stirred, almost imperceptibly. A collective intake of breath, a subtle shift in their posture. Their vacant eyes, which had been fixed on the leader, now seemed to turn towards me, not with curiosity, but with a chilling, synchronized awareness. It was like disturbing a nest of dormant insects and feeling the first slow, chitinous movements of their awakening. The leader raised his hand, not in a gesture of peace, but like a conductor silencing a discordant note. The hum roared back, louder, more aggressive, a focused beam of sonic pressure aimed directly at me. It felt like my skull was being crushed, my brain vibrated against bone, and a white-hot pain lanced through my temples. My vision blurred, spots dancing before my eyes. I tasted bile, felt a tremor run through my body, threatening to dissolve my resolve. This was it. This was the moment they would break me. But the anger, the pain, the memory of my editor's face, of the outside world, held me. I wouldn't surrender. I couldn't. With a desperate, animalistic cry that tore at my throat, I forced myself to my feet. The wooden bench scraped loudly against the floor, a jarring protest in the unnatural quiet. My legs felt like lead, but I stood, swaying, my body screaming in defiance against the overwhelming force that sought to push me down. The leader's gaze was a physical weight, pinning me, trying to force me back into my seat. But I met it, my eyes burning with a desperate, fragile will. He was human. He could be resisted. I wasn't just observing anymore. I was fighting for my very soul. The world spun, the dim light flickering around me, the faces of the cultists now a blurry, menacing halo. I could feel their collective gaze, cold and empty, yet somehow filled with a terrible, silent judgment. My chest heaved, my breath ragged. I had broken their peace. I had shattered their silence. And in that moment, standing there, battered and trembling, I knew I had done the only thing left to do. I had declared war on their oblivion. The leader's lips moved, but the words were lost in the roaring hum, lost in the frantic beat of my own heart. But his eyes, oh, his eyes, spoke volumes. They promised a peace far more terrifying than any torment. They promised an end to me. I stumbled, one foot after the other, towards the door, towards the faint, distant memory of sunlight, towards anything but this suffocating, soul-devouring void. I don't remember much of the drive back, only the frantic turn of the key, the roar of the engine, a sound so loud it almost drowned out the ringing in my ears. The dirt track felt like a highway, each bump a reminder of the distance I was putting between myself and that place. But distance, I've learned, is relative. You can leave a place, but a place can also leave its mark on you, deep and indelible. The hum, that insidious vibration, still echoes in the quiet moments. The whispers, "You are home," they still try to find purchase in the corners of my mind. I escaped their physical grasp, yes, but the cult leader's eyes, they are burned into my memory. Those deep, still pools that saw not my defiance, but my eventual surrender. He promised release, an end to struggle. And the most terrifying part, a part of me, a small, exhausted part, still remembers the seductive allure of that promise. I got my story, but it wasn't the one I set out to find. It was a story etched into my very being, a chilling testament to the fragility of self, the insidious power of a manufactured peace. It wasn't about what they would do to my body, but what they would do to my soul, stripping away everything that made me, me, until only an empty vessel remained. That's the true horror of America's most terrifying sects, not the outward display, but the inward obliteration. The world outside the compound gates seems louder now, more chaotic, but also more real, more vital. Yet sometimes, in the dead of night, I wonder if I truly broke free, or if I merely traded one kind of prison for another. Have you ever encountered a group, a belief, or even just a feeling that promised you peace, but at the cost of your very essence? Have you ever looked into eyes that were so empty they seemed to reflect nothing but a void? Tell us your experiences in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the most dreadful echoes are the ones that come from within.